All right, welcome to another turn of the century author, female author, that is, Mary E. Wilkins Freeman, The Revolt of Mother. That is the work of hers that we read this week. It's a short story. So that's a little bit of a change from some of the other things we've read. We've read, essays, we've read poetry, we've read um, like autobiographical writings, but now we have a fictional short story to read. So that's kind of fun. We did read one by Mary Shelley also earlier, but here we have another one by Mary E. Wilkins Freeman this time. There, if you look in the written out lecture, there is a photo of Mary E. Wilkins Freeman, so that's fun to see. And the dress she's wearing, and the furniture in the background, and her hair, and just, that interesting window into history again. There's another photo. Oh my goodness, in the lecture. This is really cool. It is a photo of Mark Twain's 80th birthday party. And guess who's there? Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. She is sitting no less at his right hand. So you can see that photo there too. That's really fun to see because there is Mark Twain in all his glory. Looks exactly the way, people remember Mark Twain to look, with the big mustache and the white hair and all that. And there's Mary Freeman sitting in the picture. It's on his right. Oh yeah, it's still on his right. Yeah, in real life it's on his right, and in the picture it's on his right because they're turning around looking at the photographer. So that's really fun. I don't know who anyone else is in the photo, but I do know there's Mark Twain and there's Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. The written out lecture also has, websites with links to more biographical and literary information, including letters that Mary E. Wilkins Freeman wrote. So you can read that if you're more curious about her life and you still want to know more. There are hyperlinks to the text of, I believe, all the known works of Mary E. Wilkins Freeman, too, at the Wilkins Freeman website. And then there's a fascinating link that contains hyperlinks to actual journal articles about Mary E. Wilkins Freeman from the time period. So when I say journal articles, I mean articles like written in journals, or not journals like diaries, but like magazines, things like that. So you can actually read about what people thought about her then, if you're interested. And there's a real life article on Mary E. Wilkins Freeman and a photo from an 1892 Ladies' Home Journal. Can you believe that Ladies' Home Journal has been around that long? Yeah. And so it's kind of fun to read a magazine from the time period that, we know from our modern era. And there you have an article about our author, Mary E. Wilkins Freeman, in it, and a photo of her. There's a YouTube short film that dramatizes the Mary E. Wilkins Freeman story, The Revolt of Mother, the one that we read this week, with famous actress Amy Madigan playing Mother. You may know Amy Madigan from different films. Like the most famous one I know her from is oh gosh, the movie with, if you build it, he will come. Field of Dreams. That's what it is. Yeah, she plays the wife of Field of Dreams. Anyway, she's playing Mother in this dramatization of The Revolt of Mother. And then this is kind of a funny one. There is a YouTube clip that uses plastic children's toys for a very short novelty dramatization of the Mary E. Wilkins Freeman story, The Revolt of Mother. So check out any or all of those as your interest dictates. Okay, Mary E. Wilkins Freeman. She is an American, and she lived from 1852 until 1930 to about 77 years of age. She was born in Randolph, Massachusetts, to solid pre-colonial New England stock parents. So New England, yeah. In Massachusetts, no less. Her father was a house carpenter, but times were rough in Massachusetts with a general depression in New England rural towns. So yeah, there was during the time period when she was, a youth, there was a depression of sorts. I mean, Civil War was going on during part of that time, so you can imagine that, that would really affect the economy and jobs and things like that. Mary was the first surviving child the Wilkinsons had, because remember, so many children died back then. And so she was the first surviving one. And she herself did not have a surviving sister till she was 7 years old. a lot of tragedy and heartache in these families that would lose children at very young ages that would not survive into, often they would die in childbirth, or mothers would die in childbirth, or children wouldn't survive infancy, or they wouldn't survive early childhood. For economic reasons, Mary's family moved to Vermont when she was 15, so in search of, better economy, better work. But the store that her father had tried to own there went out of business. So he moved there to try to run a store, and then it went out of business. Mary's sister died then, and her best friend moved away. And to earn a living, Mary's mother became the housekeeper for the home of Mary's unrequited love, Hanson Tyler. The family moved in with the Tylers so that the mother could, be the housekeeper. However, Mary's mother suddenly died in 1870. And her father, only 3 years later, died. So Mary was left destitute and alone in the world at the young age of 31. Without a mother, without a father, without her sister, without a husband. So, and back then, it's really hard to support yourself if you're a woman, You often would want to be a femme couverte, a woman covered by either her father or by her husband. So Mary turned to writing to support herself and enjoyed much financial and literary success. She moved back to Randolph, Massachusetts, where she lived with her close childhood friend, Mary Wales, who took care of Mary during the repeated nightmares spawned by the loss of her family. She had nightmares from all the tragic deaths of her family members. Mary was so distraught that she later became addicted to sedatives. So sedatives are ways to try to make yourself calm down and sleep. These nightmares must have been very traumatizing for her to foment the use of sedatives to the point that she actually became addicted to them. At 49, Mary finally married. She married Dr. Charles Freeman, with whom she had had an on-again, off-again engagement. However, her husband, Charles Freeman, succumbed to alcoholism, even though he was a doctor, and underwent treatment at a sanitarium. The two legally separated, and when they did that, he cut her out of his will. However, she was able to sue and be reinstated in the will. So that's kind of neat to see women getting some justice for for once, or not for once, but it's nice to see some justice, for women winning cases in court. It reminds me of Sojourner Truth when she sued way back when, and won 2 different cases at least. Anyway, she sued her husband, from whom she had been separated, to be reinstated in the will. She was still married to him, and so she was reinstated. Along with Edith Wharton, Mary was the first woman to gain membership in the National Institute of Arts and Letters. Kind of cool. Edith Wharton, she's an author, from the similar time period too. Mary was the first woman to be in that very auspicious club, the National Institute of Arts and Letters, and Edith as well. Interestingly, Mary died in Metuchen, New Jersey. So, as a New Jerseyan, one could actually visit her hillside cemetery grave in Scotch Plains. So she was buried in Scotch Plains, New Jersey. She lived in Metuchen, buried in Scotch Plains. So there we have a little New Jersey tie-in. So that's kind of neat. Being from New Jersey myself, I have not visited her grave, but I will when I will someday. Got to go back and visit that. Got to put that on my itinerary, and I will take my children too. Like her contemporary author Sarah Orne Jewett, who wrote short stories as well, Mary was famous for her stories of local color realism or regionalism. So remember we talked about realism earlier, how you like to put slices of life into stories. You talked about the stories we talk about everyday ordinary people and their everyday ordinary challenges and lives, and they discuss things in detail, to describe things very, very realistically. That's what realism, literary realism is, at least. And literary regionalism is where you take specific traits of an area and put them into the story to give it enhanced reality, because people know that region or enjoy learning about it, and they feel as if they've been transported there, because the stories or the novels or the poems that are writing in with literary regionalism are using things like accents. They're writing the way that people sound, and they're writing about the way of life that the people actually experience, and a lot of that day-to-day living and the chores that they do and the professions that they have are very much a part of the story. So that's how literary regionalism is kind of like a subset of realism, right? Where it's like you really focus on the area and you really put a lot of detail that's highly specific to the area. Well, we read another work, The Awakening by Kate Chopin, and there's a lot of regionalism and realism in that work too, where we get the daily slice of life. We get a lot of like the way people talked in it. So you'll pick up on that when you read The Revolt of Mother. It's written definitely with that the sound of the way people spoke back then in that area of New England where the characters live. So it was called realism because it focused specifically on the concerns, times, area, geography, occupation of people, custom, and even dialect of a particular area of the country. And when you say regionalism, that's when it's focusing on that area. That's special subset of realism that does that, where it focuses on that area. And in this case, in The Revolt of Mother, it's New England. The story of Mary's that we read for class, The Revolt of Mother, not only manifests the regionalism, this literary regionalism, but also the turn of the century new woman in the protagonist of Mother, Sarah Penn. So no spoilers, but we're going to see a new woman. And it's interesting to see how she ends up too. Because not all new women, most new women didn't end up that way. So I invite you to read more about Mary E. Wilkins Freeman's life in our anthology, and of course the work of hers that we studied this week, The Revolt of Mother. Enjoy.